Amazing years of support for the UOG Endowment Foundation. Through your generous contributions, we have been able to award many student scholarships, help fund college programs, and facilitate capital improvement projects at the University of Guam. As we celebrate this milestone occasion, we look forward to your continued partnership and many more years of collaboration with our island community. Viva UOG Endowment Foundation.
Attention Take Care members. Take Care's free health fair is every Saturday through September 24th from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Micronesia Mall. Learn more about Take Care's 2023 health plan offerings and wellness programs. This health fair includes free health screenings by Take Care's Wellness Center and FHP Health Center, provider network and fitness partner information, and much more. Visit TakeCareAsia.com. Take Care, our island, your health plan.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another week of Tall Tales here on 93.3 FM, The Point. My name is Jose Martinez. We have Daryl Taggerty in the booth, and you just heard the opening salvo. That marks the beginning of Tall Tales every single day. The Second Amendment, taken from the Great Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution of the United States of America. Welcome back. First thing, I want to wish my wife a very happy anniversary. Today is our first year anniversary.
Hey, happy anniversary.
A whole year ago, 1 year ago, we got married. And, yeah, it's been one of those restful.
Your first?
Not big. My first.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I had to break up with my girlfriend to get married to her. She was my girlfriend.
Same.
She was my fake girlfriend. Yeah, she was the same person, Daryl. Don't worry. Don't call her.
Oh.
She's listening. So let's go to Jimmy Cotney. Jimmy E. Cotney is that play on words that Bob Klitzkie created to rise above that other show called Meet the Press. His is Press the Meet, where we read the local editorials daily, the print editorials. Still not getting one from the Daily Post. However, the Guam Daily Post does offer a few local opinion pieces, but they're merely columns, and I don't feel like reading a couple of them today. It's not that I don't feel like it. I just don't think it offers any purpose. But we do read the ones from the Pacific Daily News. There's a little bit of effort because they print one out. They do put one out there. Sometimes it's merely a press release or a PSA, public service announcement. Sometimes it's a commercial for the Guam PDN, touting their many different services and articles that they do and other great things. But today's not that bad. It's echoing something that's going on. They did a whole spread in the paper this morning, or this morning, printed out early this morning on home prices. You remember we talked about David Lott's op-ed or column last week about rental prices. I'm not exactly sure because I don't do the numbers on this, and I don't know the correlation between rental prices and the costs of housing as far as building a house, etc., or even buying new property. I can see there's some correlation, but we also have to take into account material, land, taxes, all the good fees and things you have to pay just to put your house together as a plan.
You have to finance it too.
Exactly. So while they may seem like they're connected, there is a different story between rental prices and buying a home and even building a home. So let's start out here with the Guam PDN's opinion or editorial. Our view, balance. Housing costs on the rise. Solutions are needed. Just let me clear my throat a little. One of this election season's hot button issues is the alarming increase in the price of available homes on Guam. House hunters looking to purchase their first home or renters in search of a clean, affordable place to live in and raise their children are running into the same roadblocks. Home costs are astronomically high, interest rates are soaring, and making ends meet with power bills and daily necessities is becoming a struggle, even for working families with multiple sources of income. The Pacific Daily News today brings you an in-depth look at housing costs on Guam and some of the factors contributing to current pricing trends. We've spoken to longtime real estate professionals and industry veterans, and we've spoken to newer homeowners who shared with us their stories about the sacrifices they've made to achieve the dream of owning their own home. We also went to speak with members of our community about their thoughts on housing and the cost of living on Guam. They allowed us to meet their families. They shared with us their struggles, and the resounding response from many of our fellow Guamanians is, housing is just too expensive. As we move closer to the general election and the early voting center opens for eager voters, what do you want to hear your candidates address as we face a looming housing affordability crisis? One of the issues shared by a recent home buyer was the fact that cash buyers have an automatic advantage in the bidding war that occur for many houses on the market. This puts working families at a huge disadvantage as most are forced to seek traditional, more expensive financing options with lending institutions. How will Guam's working families compete in the housing market? Will Guam's leaders be able to provide balance to this growing housing crisis? We hope to hear more from our candidates on this and other costs of living issues as we approach Election Day. Until then, House Hunters, the Guam Association of Realtors, will be hosting Rise Up Housing Empowerment Workshops from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. on October 8th at the Micronesia Mall Center Court. Perhaps achieving the dream of home ownership starts with good old-fashioned research. Okay.
It's true.
Yeah, that is. And I haven't gotten into the market to buy, and I'm renting right now. And I'm fortunate to be locked in a price in a rate that was negotiated and it has maintained. But costs are rising for my landlord. I know that, and I expect something to happen. You know, can't pretend that no costs affect rent at all. But I don't know. It's one of those things I told myself when I moved here. Granted, I moved from Connecticut to here. Connecticut didn't have that much of a great of a low cost of living, but the availability of product and choices were much greater than here on Guam. And so I had to tell myself that that's what island life is about. But we're not just talking about little things and products in the store shelves that we can do with that. We're talking about shelter. We're talking about housing, and that's going to be the biggest. I think the least talked about issue. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Moylan and a couple other senators have put out a legislation to at least talk about or try to rein in the housing costs.
We even have two agencies, one locally funded, one federally funded, who deal only in housing. And they should have a very good white paper updated every year on the housing market on Guam to advise the legislature if there is policy needed.
What are those agencies called?
GURA and Guam Housing Corporation.
Uh-huh.
And,
yeah, there's a...
And they have people who are well-paid, competitive wages to do public-oriented research and reporting.
Like
to
this little
advise other
blurb.
parts of the government.
Yeah, there was a little quote from GURA, at the end of one of the articles here in Guam PDN. But I'll let readers or listeners go pick up their local copy or go online, because it is available online as well, to read it. They're good articles. I think they can go deeper and give a little bit more answers, but right now it's just facts they're stating and not really a deeper analysis of
Yeah, it
costs.
used to be that economics was just a dismal science. You bumped up against it when you needed to, but otherwise
Left it
you didn't
alone.
have to worry about the economy. It just sort of was where where you lived. But now everybody's, wringing their hands over one thing or another in the economy, whether it affects them directly or not. And it really needs to be more focus.
And it makes for good campaign because it is election season, right, Daryl?
Well, if it's not substantive, then it's just smoke.
Then it's just smoke.
If they've got something
Oh, we
to
got it.
say, then they should say it. And as far as solutions, and if they've got a solution, then they're incumbents. Then it's a failure of having implemented it over the last term.
So what do you think about the
Campaign.
AG campaign? Has there been lots of smoke or lots of flames?
Lots of nothing.
Lots of flaming. I'm going to go to the card next, but before we do that, before we get to the card, it is October, a brand new month. We're already in 1 month without Bob Klitzkie, and we're still on the air.
Feels like a month.
I'm impressed with ourselves.
It feels like a month.
It's been at least 3 weeks. 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
So
So
finished 3 weeks.
the beginning of every month, Bob would like to remind our international listening audience about the Tall Tales rules of engagement. I'm going to read a couple of them here. I'm not going to go through the whole stack because it is a pretty lengthy. I did go through the entire rules of engagement in the beginning. Actually, after the first week of September, but let's start here. Listen to radio talkers, read the blogs and blog comments in the papers, check out the conversations in the bars and coffee shops, and it soon becomes apparent that answers are often more abundant than questions concerning the important issues of the day. One of the functions of Tall Tales will be to state the questions for the answers that may seem so sure of, and then respond to those questions. Here are some of the answers that will be dealt with in the coming weeks, but not necessarily in the order of their occurrence or importance. 1, you can carry a gun anywhere at any time. There should be term limits for senators. These are points that will be brought up, will be answered throughout the course of Tall Tales.
Right.
Not necessarily this week.
Yes.
Not
It's
necessarily this
intended
month.
to be answered at some point in the course of the show.
And some of them, most of them, in fact, I think all of them we've heard already of them and continue to hear of them from Bob Klitzkie. The job of the Civil Service Commission is to protect employees. Guam should be decolonized. Everyone should vote on Chamorro self-determination. Dave Davis should just leave it alone. Guam is a colony. Guamanians are statutory, not constitutional U.S. citizens. The U.S. should grant us self-government now. They should give us self-determination. It's kind of an oxymoron, huh? Guam can never become a state. Being a senator is a 24/7 job. AG and public auditor are too. The political parties should pay for their primaries. The governor has so much power that the legislature must be full-time to keep him in check. Well, they voted for themselves not to keep any governor in check, but I digress.
They don't need to keep her in check.
They don't need to keep her. No, this is the Tall Tales rules of engagement, where the pronoun used is him. It is a general pronoun. It's not meant to designate who is in office.
There's actually a part of the code that specifies how when you see a pronoun, whether it's masculine or feminine, it includes the other gender. So there is no need to get all huffy about
Say
the
him
use of
slash
one
her.
or another.
Right.
No. When you say him, it also includes her. When you say her, it also includes him.
Does it include they? I'm not sure if it does
They
in
never
this.
thought of that when they wrote this rules of legal construction.
Well, this just in Bob Klitzkie says he's changing his pronouns to tall and tails.
Is that like puppy dog tails?
Anyways, here's another one. The purpose of legislative oversight hearings is to hold government officials accountable. Political signs should be posted on private property only. There's a small little article on it's a funny article on political signs. I forget which publication it was. It was pretty much an article saying that there's not much about political signs this campaign season.
Well, I noticed most recently how many signs are attached to fences on private property but
Yes.
are on the government side of
right.
the fence. And
Does
that's
the government own the area above also? Because I know in some places the air above
all property lines extend in a plane
all the way up to
up and down.
yeah.
And the outside of a wall, when you erect a wall or a fence, the other side is the other side.
That's interesting. I'm going to go through every village and write down all the violations. I don't have time for that.
But Public Works isn't collecting any of them.
Here's the last one that will be talked about, has been talked about, and is debated. And this by no way is a iteration of or a description of the opinion of this host or Bob Klitzkie either. There is no competition in the price of gasoline on Guam. This list is not to suggest that there aren't plenty of other interesting questions or answers to take up every day. There are, and they can be addressed. Usually serious and sometimes humorous, Tall Tales will examine current events, government and politics, and occasionally drift into history, culture, religion, law, and once in a great, great while, but only very, very cautiously, rumors and gossips. Tall Tales is structured, but can often entertain whatever callers want to discuss. Tall Tales is an issue-driven, fact-oriented, interactive talk show that invites audience participation. It has been the top-rated FM afternoon show in Micronesia. And the point is Pika's best radio station for 2021. Just a reminder, tomorrow begins the voting of Pika's best. The Point, 93.3 FM, our station here, along with our other two sister stations of the Choice family, Star 101 and Boss 104, have been nominated as one of the top 5 radio stations on Guam for Pika's Best. The voting process now starts to find the ultimate top radio station, and that begins tomorrow, October 4th, as well as top radio personalities Ray Gibson, Kyle Mandapat, Daryl Izama, Albert Wan, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's 4. We got 4 out of 5 from the Choice family of radio personalities, and they too are in the running for best radio personality, Pika's Best. So don't forget to go to guampdn.com and vote online. If you do have a certain number of votes, I believe you're put into a running of a raffle for a gift certificate or a gift card for something. I'll have more information in the next couple of days. And then we're going to go on to this last part here. My job is to make the complex understandable and, if possible, interesting. Sometimes we comfort the afflicted. Sometimes we afflict the comfortable. Tall Tales is interactive, but no soapboxes allowed, no filibusters, and no pin the tail on the talk show host either. No hostile takeovers. Your humble, self-effacing, ever-modest host is supported by the Tall Tales think tank, to include the foreign policy guru, a constitutional law and organic act expert, a research survey and statistics bureau, and now a scriptwriter for the 19th floor. Drama 2. Those, of course, describe all. Welcome to the 19th floor, Daryl. Don't forget to tip your waiter. So those are the abridged Tall Tales rules of engagement. There's a couple of other articles, and I'll get into that in November. No, I won't. Bob will get into it when he returns. He'll be back in November. I believe the last week of October. Yep. Let's read the card, and then we'll go to the bottom of the hour break. Today, we will talk about, of course, Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. The rice is not red. It's orange, according to Paul Zerzan. But according to what everybody knows and what everybody says, the rice has always been red, will always be red, and how dare you, Paul Zerzan? Of course, we know that it's not about rice. It's not about the color. It's not even about Paul. It's about the narrative. It's about sticking to what everybody knows and not shaking the bee's nest. We like to shake the bee's nest here, though, because it's our business. Bad pun. We're also going to get into Public Law 3634. I found one in the Post. It's a little one. Is this on today's? This is yesterday's. Wow. Here we go. And just want to say, Guam Memorial Hospital Authority, you have a very strong agenda for new business. Lots of things you're going to talk about. However, in number 3, old business, there's nothing indicated. And Public Law 3634 added a sentence. Let's just reiterate here. Subsection, this is in Section 4 of the bill. Subsection D is hereby added to paragraph 8107 of Chapter 8, Title 5, GCA, to read, notices must contain the agenda of matters to be discussed at the respective meeting. Agenda items must be in sufficient detail to put the public on notice as to what is to be discussed. Now, it might seem minor, it might seem simple, it might seem never mind, but when you put old business but nothing there, we don't know what the old business is or if there is any old business, and so you could have a meeting in jeopardy if anybody wants to dispute it because it does violate the public law. We'll read the rest of the card after the break. Don't go away. More Tall Tales after this.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
Does your physical workplace have an impact on the mental outlook of workers, their overall job satisfaction, and their productivity? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about that and what you might want to do about it. It's The Extra Point here on 93.3.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point by Jerry Roberts at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
And we are back, Tall Tale, broadcasting on 93.3 FM. The Point, it is now 4:29. Did we already do the bell? Let's do the bell again. This is the card for today. We have a repeat of Repeat versus McNitch. We're just going to drag it out. I think it's an interesting debate, conversation. The Wall Street Journal versus the Washington Post. WSJ versus WAPO. Then we have, I don't know what I wrote here. Oh, the Wuhan pandemic versus the anxiety pandemic. And then we have some leftovers, the pro-abortionists versus choice, Ellingson versus the red speech, and the FBI versus helpless humans. And also, I have to say ahead of time, we will have the Hope Cristobal screen test today. It is Monday, and it is a feature of Tall Tales until it becomes a feature no longer. And so get your popcorn ready, get your listening ears ready, and turn up your bush cutter. So Repeat versus McNitch. This is an article that made the top of the fold on the Post, which I found very interesting. Interesting article, but I'm not sure it deserves top of the fold, but regardless, it's being talked about a little bit. I find it funny that Jesse Kanga hasn't provided the Post with a picture without a mask yet. So here we are. I guess towing the public health emergency line is still in order for anybody who works.
Maybe the photographer was coughing.
Maybe. I don't know. But I'm glad that he's doing that to protect us from, paper cuts. The University of Guam professor Ron McNitch has suggested that the Guam Ethics Commission consider developing special procedures to prevent the complaints process from being utilized as a political tool. Comments prompted by the public submission of a complaint against him by attorney Peter Santos, who is vying to become the next Attorney General of Guam. Apparently, a filing was made against me this week, but it was made not via the process specified in the law, but via a public pronouncement through the media, McNitch stated September 23rd during a meeting of the Guam Ethics Commission. And I'd like to suggest kindly to the Commission that when you have persons using the Ethics Commission for political or public interests outside of the scope specified in the law, you might want to develop special procedures to handle those kinds of cases, because basically it means that the Ethics Commission process can be used as a political tool, and I'm very concerned about that, the professor added. McNitch on Thursday said his point was to explain that the commission should have a separate process and specific procedures during an election season to prevent the process from being used in politics, citing a rule in the legislature that bars legislative ethics complaints within a certain number of days from the election. The current legislative standing rules do require that all complaints to the legislature be made no later than July 1st, 2022, or about 4 months before the election. McNitch suggested a similar rule should be made for the Ethics Commission for people who want to make public complaints. You see, Santos did not follow really the requirements of making an ethic complaint against me. He basically cut a press release and then sent it to everybody, and then to the Ethics Commission. Usually, Ethics Commission complaints are handled privately. If they have a finding showing there is a violation, then they'll come out with their finding, McNitch said. Santos responded to McNitch's comments by saying, everything should be transparent. The Ethics Commission has a duty to keep things confidential, but the reporting person does not. So if I have a complaint about a person who's supposed to be teaching an ethics class, and while he's teaching an ethics class is violating ethics rules, then that should be made public if I choose to do so, Santos said, adding that most complaints want complainants. I think that's the
Complainants.
word. Yeah. Complainants to remain confidential, but if the complainant wants to put it on blast, then that's up to the individual. That's my First Amendment right, Santos said. Commission Executive Director Jesse Kanga said commissioners have not had any direct conversations with him regarding McNitch's comment last week, him referring to Pete Santos. But if the commission wanted to review any potential procedure, that issue will need to be published as an agenda item within a scheduled meeting. It actually has to be submitted as a complaint also following the complaint guidelines, if I'm not mistaken. There is a process, right?
There's a process.
Yeah, and that's the first of the process before it gets put on the agenda.
What's funny is that it sounds like Ron, Dr. McNinch is saying that there is an ethical standard that a complainant should follow, which is that applies to all public persons, and but public officials who are covered by the or public employees covered by the ethics policy have protections, should be protected against. It's
Well, there is a
it's
process.
ethics. Yeah,
there is a
there's-
process when you're filing an ethics
Right.
complaint.
But
Yeah.
Dr. McNinch is saying that it's a matter of ethics for that a person
Yeah.
who's complaining should follow, because that applies to all people.
Well, it could also have to
expressing
apply.
things in
It
the
could also
public.
be applied to a process of determining if somebody is violated or not. There's the accused, and then the one who's doing the accusing, and you want to maintain a semblance of, for lack of a better term, innocence, right, for the accused. And I think the process helps that. And whether you think of it as a protection or not, I don't know. I hear what you're trying to say.
Free speech
but I don't
is
think
not.
that's what it is.
Doesn't is not.
Well, you're already
who's going
determining
to-
something, right? You're already making a determination.
That is the conclusion that somebody came up with and is saying. If you say that you can't accuse anyone of
No.
anything
Right now we're
unless
talking
it's
about
proven.
but right now we're talking about the ethics commission, and there's a process.
That's
And-
right. No, and I have no problem with
Okay.
the process.
And that's
It's just
that's what this article's about.
That's right. And Ron is saying that a different ethics applies to the person that's filing the complaint, that he should not be speaking out about it, because he himself is then bound
in the
by it.
in the context of a political campaign, in the context of a political season, and he was citing the legislature's rulings, and that's what this context was. Not in a general statement,
then-
but in the
then-
context of the elections.
Right. So you should not file
I hear what you're trying to say.
you should not file an ethics complaint. You can just blow your opinion out there because it's campaign season.
And that's what happened, because apparently Jesse Kenga has not received any ethics complaints yet. Well, we don't know it because he awkwardly said it needs, if it's going to be reviewing any potential procedures, it'll need to be put on a published agenda. But he never said whether they received one from Pete Santos or not. And I thought
That's
that was
right.
interesting.
The process is separate from the public discussion.
Okay. I'm going to continue with this article. Santos, who was running as a write-in candidate for AG, complained to the commission that McNinch spent 80% of his time instructing the class in ethics in government by discussing his personal opinion on why Guam law did not permit write-in candidates for the Attorney General position. McNinch and Santos butted heads on the issue at a Guam Election Commission meeting, although the GEC ultimately determined that write-in candidates are permitted in the general election. I watched that exchange, and they were absolutely correct. McNinch said that there are 40 or 50 people in the room that day who could say Santos's allegation was not true. As part of normal ethics training, McNinch said he reads news headlines and pulls out ethics-related articles. The issue involving Santos wasn't so much about the write-in campaign, but the money he paid for a political action committee, according to McNinch. So, so that's it. But I'm going to go back to what ought to be talked about, whether you are one side of the issue or the other side of the issue. It's about process. It's about following the process. And if you find the process is unfair or needs tweaking, then speak up and follow through with that process of bringing it up to the people that could change it or listen to it. But having an ethics complaint not filed with the ethics commission, but trying to prove it, it does seem like more of a political stunt than it does. This is, for me, a political stunt than it does as a serious complaint. If it was serious, it would have been put through the ethics commission, but it wasn't, according to Jesse Kenga.
And so it's being amplified during campaign time. He is running.
Yes, and that's the point. And I think that's the point.
On the point.
So let's move on to the Wall Street Journal versus the Washington Post. WAPO. The wackos at WAPO.
Both revered local rags. Available online.
Available online and available in Washington, D.C.
I think you can get it delivered to your home at a price.
I've seen the Wall Street Journal here. I haven't seen the Post, though I don't know what edition the Wall Street Journal is, if it might be something that's flown in here or printed here. I don't think it's printed here. But I digress. Anyways, I'm going to go with this is from the editorial board, and they put out an article or an editorial based on the Supreme Court returning back to session. And, of course, with the new justice, I can't say her first name without laughing.
Ketanji.
Yeah, Ketanji.
Ketanji?
Because she can't see straight. Actually, she doesn't know what a female is. But, again, that's not the point. Back at the court, something did not print here. Let me see here.
So I'll just jump in and say, yeah, the proof is in the pudding.
No, yeah, something didn't print here. Let me go to my app real quick. In other words, the reason why I put both together, because there was an article that came out in Washington Post, an article, not an op-ed, not an editorial, and it was interesting the way that they had formulated their headline, and it has a lot to do with the juxtaposition of systemic racism, the narrative, and what I find not just interesting, troubling, is that the narrative is ruling how people are understanding our branches of government. And it's shown in the way people are protesting in front of the Supreme Court steps, in front of any courthouse. Protesting decisions is kind of a fruitless effort, knowing that the Supreme Court justices are not voted in, and they don't go by the rule of public opinion. Okay, and of course I can't find the article now. Here we go. The Supreme Court kicks off its new term on Monday, and the welcome back isn't universal. Supreme Court terms began amid questions about its legitimacy, unquote, says a headline over a news story in the Washington Post. We could cite a dozen similar takes. These articles offer no explanation for this peak other than that the author and the people they quote don't like the opinions the court issued last term. We know how they feel. For decades, we disagreed with court rulings when progressives held sway, but we never called the court illegitimate. But now that the left has lost the court as a backup legislature for its policy goals, the institution is supposedly broken. Tell us again, who is the threat to democratic institutions? And then the rest of it goes on to lay out what's going to be happening in the next couple of days and weeks during this session. And here I'm going to, at the risk of touting this article, read the article by the Washington Post as an example of systemic racism. And those who are astute listeners to Tall Tales and have listened to Bob Klitzkie for a while will pick up on all the nuances of this article that seems to want to talk about the Supreme Court, but is actually describing what the legislature should be listening to. And by way, I mean, it's all about opinion.
Let's have it. You're going to read a Washington Post article on Tall Tales.
This is the headline. Supreme Court, dogged by questions of legitimacy, is ready to resume. A new term opens with public approval of the court at historic lows, and the justices themselves debating what the court's rightward turn means for its institutional integrity. And by justices, they mean Kagan, and we read that.
Also Roberts.
Well, yeah, but not in the way that Kagan did.
But he still raised
Let me finish reading
in a public statement.
Reading this. The Supreme Court begins its new term Monday, but the nation, its leaders, and the justices themselves do not appear to be over the last one. The court's 6-3 conservative majority quickly moved its jurisprudence sharply to the right, and there is no reason to believe the direction or pace is likely to change. This version of the court seems steadfast in allowing more restrictions on abortion, wrong, fewer on guns, wrong, and shifting a previously strict line separating church and state and reining in government agencies, wrong, wrong. If it is the conservative legal establishment's dream, it has come at a cost. I'm not a constitutional attorney.
Just read
Never
the
have
article.
been.
Just read the article. It's clear.
I'm going to state my opinion because I'm at this mic right here, Daryl. So I'm going to state what I'm going to state.
I know. I just want to hear the article,
So-
but it's clear. It's clear
Let me finish.
what it is doing.
Let me finish. Everything that they talked about here is not talking about law or what the Supreme Court justices do on the bench. It talks about opinions that lay people have when they don't understand the law. Now I'm going to continue. Polls show public approval of the court plummeted to historic lows, with a record number of respondents saying the court is too conservative after the right wing of the court overturned Roe versus Wade's guarantee of a constitutional right to abortion. and again, all right, let's go on. President Biden is trying to put the court in the political spotlight, hoping the abortion decision's shock waves rocked the foundation of the fall's midterm elections, once thought to be a boon to Republicans. And the justices themselves are openly debating what the court's rightward turn has meant for its institutional integrity. Not legitimacy, integrity. Chief Justice John G. Roberts defends his conservative colleagues with whom he does not always agree, saying unpopular decisions should not call the court's legitimacy into question. On the other side, liberal Justice Elena Kagan increasingly is sounding an alarm about the next precedents that could fall and the implication for public perception of the bench. The court's new docket offers that potential. And I'm going to interject here. Justice Elena Kagan is #1 gaslighter, and she sits on the bench. That's just highly discouraging. Justices have agreed to revisit whether universities can use race in a limited way when making admission decisions, a practice that the court has endorsed since 1978. 2 major cases involve voting rights. The court will consider whether laws forbidding discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation must give way to business owners who do not want to provide wedding service to same-sex couples. And after limiting the Environmental Protection Agency's authority in air pollution cases last term, the court will hear a challenge regarding the Clean Water Act. Liberal justices sound worried. Again, the Environmental Protection Agency is not the determining factor here. It is the lawmakers, and the EPA got out of control just the way some Department of Health and Social Services officials got way out of hand and overstepped their boundaries. And that's the reason why the court said we have to follow what the Constitution says, put it back into the legislation. But I digress, because again, this is the Washington Post. They're more interested in emotional rants than they are about the law. The court shouldn't be wandering around just inserting itself in every hot button issue in America. Again, a complete misunderstanding about what happened in the courts. They took themselves out of the decision. They took themselves out of the decision and put it back in the hands of the states. It shouldn't be doing it in a way that reflects one ideology or one set of political views over the other, Kagan said last week at Salve Regina, a Roman Catholic university in Rhode Island. She said that disregarding stare decisis, the doctrine of abiding by past decisions in the absence of compelling evidence that change is required, undermines public confidence. It just doesn't look like law when some new judges appointed by a new president comes in and just starts tossing out the old stuff. Gaslighter #1. I'm going to pause right there. We're going to go to a break, and we'll be back with more Washington Post.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning Mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all 3.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
And we are back here, Tall Tales, KUSG 93.3 FM. We have 10 minutes before the top of the hour, and I'm going to try to complete this article.
Can I just say something at this point? It's not about the article. I didn't pick this music. I don't know where all this music came from, but please, I have nothing to do with the music that you hear on these spots.
Okay.
I don't know where it came from. I don't even know who's playing
It's
it.
on rotation. That's all I know. It's all random. Actually, I heard Daryl saying he's picking this one specifically.
Hey.
Well, did you hear me?
Please.
All right, let's continue with this Washington Post article that was titled Supreme Court Dogged by Questions of Legitimacy. So far, they're only citing polls, national polls, which doesn't determine legitimacy, and Justice Kagan.
It's the dogs.
So is Justin Kagan the one who's claiming that it's an illegitimate court?
I think if you read the minority opinions of these decisions, you'll find plenty of expressions. But when they go out and make speeches, they're just amplifying what it was that they said in the opinion.
Yeah, and the last time we read on Kagan, it was indicated that dissenting justices have never done a campaign the way that Kagan has done. But that, I don't want to revisit that one because I will later on. I've kept that article because I thought it was pretty good. The one that talks about Justice Kagan's recent tour of campuses. Do you write it or anyways, talking bad about her fellow justices in a general way, not specifically. Back to the article. The new justice this year is a liberal, Ketanji Brown Jackson, the court's first African-American woman, and was nominated by Biden to fill the seat of Stephen G. Breyer, who retired after 28 years. Jackson will not change the court's ideological makeup. Breyer declared his last term in the court very frustrating in a recent interview with CNN that nobody saw. Breyer was known during his tenure for pragmatism and trying to reach compromise, and he seemed to warn the conservative majority about making bold moves. You start writing too rigidly, the world will come around and bite you in the back, he said. Why? They're gonna vote him out of office? No matter what the new term brings, it is unlikely to match the drama of its predecessor, a repudiation of decades of the court's precedents on abortion rights. The leak of Justice Samuel A. Alito Jr.'s draft opinion in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization upholding a restrictive Mississippi abortion law created unprecedented tension at the court for a time which was surrounded by a high black fence to ward off pro-abortion protesters. The opinion, joined by Justice Clarence Thomas and 3 justices chosen by President Donald Trump, achieved a decades-long conservative goal of overturning Roe. For many, that was a cause for great celebration, said Irv Gorenstein, the executive director of the Supreme Court Institute at the Georgetown Law Center. For many others, it shattered their faith in the Supreme Court. Inside the court, Dobbs has provoked a deeply divisive debate on what it means for the court to act with legitimacy. Now here's a second person calling on the legitimacy of the court. Again, the court rules on laws, not on legitimacy and not on the opinion of polls.
It really should be integrity.
Integrity, there you go. And this gaslighting of legitimacy, remember, it's in the headline.
No, I know. They keep
Post.
using legitimacy,
It's disgusting.
It really should be integrity.
Not just integrity.
That's what's being questioned, is integrity.
Yeah, and I would even say that integrity isn't even a wrong word. It's just opinion. What it means for the court to act with the opinion of the people, because that's what it is. They're substituting words that are legitimate to me, words that are legitimate to people, on the credibility of our justices, because they don't agree with the opinions of the courts.
There is really no difference between calling this court not liking the decisions of this court versus not liking the decisions of the court for the last 43 years.
But they never called them illegitimate.
That's right. You're right. But it is just as tainted politically in the political field.
I agree. But that's politics, and that's not the legitimacy of the court. And that's not another justice who sit on the bench ever called the court illegitimate. For the first time I've heard since I've been alive, a court justice doing that while she's on the bench.
That's right. And it's politics these days. This is campaigning 2022.
And it's disgusting. It's disgusting for a Supreme Court justice to do that. And I'm going to say that right now. I'm not going to hold back. I think anybody who doesn't recognize that she's making herself illegitimate by spouting that or giving herself that taint doesn't understand what our three branches of government do. Kind of like on Guam, where our legislature doesn't understand that they are a separate branch for the administration. But I digress.
She's calling her colleagues' integrity into question.
Yep. I call hers. And I hope the rest of the United States does also when it votes in the people that appoint these kind of justices who go in there as activists, not as justices. Roberts voted to uphold the Mississippi law, but not to overturn Roe, calling that step too great a jolt to the legal system. But at a speech in Colorado last month, he defended justices who make controversial decisions. All of our opinions are open to criticism, Roberts said in remarks to judges and lawyers. In fact, our members do a great job of criticizing some opinions from time to time. But simply because people disagree with an opinion is not a basis for criticizing the legitimacy of the court. The public conversation among the justices since the Dobbs decision has been remarkable. Alito gave what liberals interpreted as a boastful address about the controversial decision this summer at a conference in Rome on religion and law. I had the honor this term of writing, I think, the only Supreme Court decision in the history of that institution that has been lambasted by a whole string of foreign leaders who felt perfectly fine commenting on American law, Alito said at the Notre Dame Religious Liberty Summit, sponsored by the Religious Liberty Initiative at the University of Notre Dame's Law School. He took umbrage at the criticism from Britain's Prince Harry. I took out the word that they used to describe that umbrage. Anybody who wants to read it who's read this article. What really wounded me was when the Duke of Sussex addressed the United Nations and seemed to compare the decision, whose name may not be spoken, with the Russian attack on Ukraine, Alito said. With a sweep and speed, Supreme Court's conservatives ignite a new era. And that's an article that they cited. I'm not going to finish the rest of this article because there's more of the same rhetoric, disparaging comments about conservative justices, and reckless citing in quotations of who they have labeled the liberal justices. And can't wait to see who the justice who can't define what a woman is when she puts her dissents in or when she remarks on anything else. You're listening to Tall Tales here on KUSG 93.3 FM. We're going to the top of the hour, the big halftime show. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Hurricane Ian's devastation in Florida. I'm Laura Cantor, Fox News. Recovery efforts underway in Florida after Hurricane Ian caused mass destruction in places like Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel. Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio discussing the devastating impact Ian will have on those communities on ABC's This Week.
This is a character-altering event, and it'll change the character and the nature of these communities. They'll be rebuilt, but you can't rebuild something that a slice of old Florida and bring it back. It'll be something new, but it won't be the same, and that's the most heartbreaking part about it from an economic standpoint. Obviously, the human toll is still being calculated. That has no price. It's extraordinary, and we fear that number will continue to rise.
At least 68 deaths have been attributed to Hurricane Ian, 61 in Florida. President Biden will be visiting Florida on Wednesday after he travels to Fiona-ravaged Puerto Rico on Monday. He promised to send federal aid to impacted areas for as long as it takes. Ukraine is reclaiming their territory that other countries say Russia illegally annexed. Fox's Trey Yingst has more from Kyiv, Ukraine.
Ukrainian troops are making fresh territorial gains in the east as the war grinds on, and the threat of nuclear weapons remains on the table. Heavy fighting continues in Bakhmut as Ukrainian soldiers hold their positions. Russian forces have focused their efforts on the small town in recent weeks, while the civilian population tries to evacuate. Russian President Putin claims the people living here are now Russian citizens, though his troops relentlessly shell their roads and villages.
Pope Francis condemning Russia's nuclear threats. The two top finishers in Brazil's presidential election are headed to an October 30th runoff. Leftist former president Lula da Silva will face far-right incumbent Jair Bolsonaro, who outperformed expectations. America is listening to Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagat and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagatan location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
With the midterm elections fast approaching, New York Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin denounces Governor Kathy Hochul's crime policies on Fox's Next Revolution with Steve Hilton. Zeldin is facing Hochul in New York's gubernatorial election.
Crime wave Kathy. And New Yorkers want to feel safe on our streets and in our subways. We saw the attack on the EMT in Queens. This woman was out on her lunch break, unprovoked attack. She was murdered. And then the next day, while we're all mourning that loss, we read about a steam fitter who got fatally stabbed on an L train.
A football legend discussed his recent health struggles Sunday. Fox's Matt Napolitano reports.
During Sunday's NFL on Fox pregame show, Terry Bradshaw addressed worries about his health, having displayed shortness of breath and struggling to stand in recent broadcasts.
In November, I was diagnosed with bladder cancer.
The Football Hall of Famer underwent surgery and treatment and was deemed cancer-free, but he fell ill again in March.
Now we find a tumor in my left neck, and it's a Merkel cell tumor, which is a rare form of skin cancer. So I had that surgery done.
After another round of surgery and treatment, the 74-year-old Bradshaw says he's cancer-free, telling fans that while he may not look like himself, he certainly feels more like himself.
In Portland, Oregon, residents there criticizing local officials' handling of the homeless crisis.
We spoke with Portland resident Jillian Rose, who passionately shared her fears over the area's homelessness crisis at a city council meeting on Wednesday. She says these homeless encampments are dangerous and have human feces, open drug use. But Portland's Democratic Mayor Ted Wheeler appeared to scoff or laugh when she finished her comments. The latest numbers show more than 5,220 people are homeless in the Portland area, and that's up from about 4,000 in 2019, and those numbers are likely higher by now.
That's Fox's Christina Coleman. I'm Laura Cantor, Fox News.
Tell me about it.
it, stud.
Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Festival is back on Saturday, October 22nd. We rockin' and rollin' at the Dusatani Guam Resort from 2 to 10 p.m. Bring your friends and come dressed in your best grease costume to win up to $500 in cash and prizes. So bust out those leather jackets and 50-style outfits as we party the night away at Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Fest. Don't be a square. Get your tickets now at craftbeerfestguam.com or cruise on by any 76 Circle K location. Now that's cool, baby.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarte Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
That is the big halftime show here on Tall Tales. If you are watching on YouTube.com or on Facebook, you were watching the Rogues Gallery playing as we go through and watch the big band, the flag corps, the cheerleaders, the drum corps, all that goes into making the big halftime show for Tall Tales. The big Jumbotron has the Rogues Gallery. That's I think it's behind you, Daryl. He looked.
He got me to look.
It's awesome. Did you see it? So you too can also have your mug put up on the during the halftime show playing the Rogues Gallery by obtaining an I'm a Tailgater T-shirt. Going to www.thepoint.gu. Click on the link by the post that has my beard and the T-shirt. I'm a tailgater. And go to the link, order your shirt, take a picture of yourself wearing the shirt. You and your friends, you and your family, you and your pets. I think they make them pet size also. Not pets, but pet sizes. Just get the small ones. Some people, those are family members as well. And then send that picture, that mugshot, that selfie to the Points WhatsApp at 671-797-8255, and we'll add it to the big halftime show Rogues Gallery every day, starting a little after 5 o'clock, usually 5 minutes after 5 o'clock. Right now it's Monday. It is time for the Hope Cristobal, the audition, screen test. She is in the running for the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know if it's been determined yet or not. But I want to say if this wasn't cited in one of the interviews as a time where she had to ward off all the protesters recently at a Black Lives Matter rally, this probably wouldn't be that much important, notwithstanding everything else that goes along with Hope Cristobal being a former senator and the writer of the bill that created the Commission on Chamorro Self-Determination. They don't say Chamorro self-determination anymore. They just say Commission on Self-Determination. They leave
It's not
Chamorro out a lot.
decolonization?
Or decolonization, I'm sorry. You're right.
Yeah, because it superseded the self-determination.
Mm-hmm. So without further ado, here is Hope Soul screen test where she confronts the multitude of protesters that day at a local Black Lives Matter rally.
Colonizer. You're nothing but a white colonizer. That's who you are. Colonization is the same thing as slow murder. You're a murderer. That's who you are. We need to just do different. We need to do that. Get off my island.
Sir, you need to go. You can't be policing people here and telling people how to protest or what to protest for. You need to go. You need to go. I'm against this. That's cool, but you cannot be policing people and telling them how to protest and what to advocate for. She has a right to go.
I'm an indigenous Chamorro. I have more rights here than you are. You came here because of the structures of colonialism, asshole. Tayo mamalaw, how sige dulun tano. Itaw-taw tano, how. Waho gini taw-taw tano. Waho gini madahoga. Waho na son na kay gitu gini. Hago taza na son mo gini. Wasanganina. You need to leave.
You need to go.
Please.
You need to get out of here.
Please pause this.
Get out of here. When I get a chance, go.
Thank you. Thank you, partner. Please leave. No, you did not
What happened, ma'am?
Well, he confronted me.
What did he
He's
say?
telling me I shouldn't be here. I support Black Lives Matter. It's part of the colonialistic systemic racism. And I came here to support these people. He's a white man that has come here. And he continues the legacy of colonialism. He continues to fight people, individuals, my goodness. I'm a former senator. I authored the Commission on Decolonization. I'm a malo.
We are proud of you, Auntie.
Just malasi.
And there you go, the screen test of Hope Cristobal. And I'm curious who took that video. And was that a news
We
reporter?
should be crediting that person.
Yeah, it should be, but not sure. It could have been a anonymous submission. It could have been one of those the film that we find on the cutting room floor, the outtakes. Because remember, this is an audition. This is
somebody posted it.
Secret outtakes that they put on the extra of films. I'm interested to see what film she's running for. But this is important to note because you heard the slew of talking points describing Paul Zerzan, and I would suggest to anybody who's met Paul Zerzan that while you may think he falls under all those talking points, he's pretty much the same minded as Hope Cristobal is, I've heard, in a lot of his politicking, a lot of his talk, and he even went there to support Black Lives Matters. So this is not about Black Lives Matters. This is about systemic racism. The rice is not red. So for him to be down there, he shouldn't have been. For him to support Black Lives Matter the way he did is not legitimate, was not credible.
Well, he was counter protesting someone instead of protesting.
Yeah, I think
as a
it's
positive.
called. I think he was calling out another group for co-opting the protest.
Yeah, and
so that was interesting.
You know,
yeah, it's a no-no when you go to protest. You can't co-opt the protest for something else, no matter how closely you think it's linked together.
Yeah, and
that's
even,
also the
even
racism.
for him to be doing that is like
systemic racism.
Just let people be. If they're gonna be
right
wrong, let them be wrong.
Let's move on from her. Because we will play this again Monday because there are not enough people who've seen this before, and it is an interesting juxtaposition to everything else that's out there in the media. I was trying to debate which one to go to next because I'll go to something that I feel is a little tongue-in-cheek, but it may just be that I'm not sensitive enough to this type of affliction on a lot of people. This next thing is the Wuhan pandemic versus the anxiety pandemic. And that's not to say that I don't think people experience anxiety or worrisome or frustrations, but at the glut of stories we hear of universities providing safe spaces to snowflakes online who can't deal with difference of opinions, and so they act out. And I'll use the previous video as a small example of this. This article, I can't even remember where I got it from. The Wall Street Journal talks about a pandemic of anxiety that we're looking at, possibly. Titled, Advisory Panels to the Federal Government Say Everyone Age 8 to 65 Should Now Be Screened. What took them so long? The idea that we live in an age of anxiety has been common at least since White House W.H. Auden's book-length poem with that title appeared in 1947. In 1993, the psychiatrist Peter Kramer produced a best-selling book, Listening to Prozac, a meditation on the implications of the quickly adopted antidepressant drug approved in 1987. The task force's recommendation that virtually all adults be screened for anxiety will be significant if support builds for its adoption as a standard care. That would move what most people consider a recurring condition of life, such as happiness or sadness, closer to something that would be submissible for control by formal institutions, including the state. The question is, will this make us better or worse? Much of the public isn't in the mood for public health interventions. The COVID-19 pandemic is winding down amid a broad reckoning about the restrictive policy recommendations scientific authorities made and imposed on the public. This striking headline appeared recently in the publication Education Week. The pandemic was a wrecking ball for K-12, and we're still tallying the damage, including anxiety. So skepticism is inevitable when an arm of the science policy community emerges at the pandemic's end to say all children and adults, but not adults over 65, should somehow be screened for anxiety disorders. Does that make you anxious?
This makes me, it sounds like somebody's trying to sell pills.
Mm-hmm. It's already clear that a post-COVID care industry is emerging. Anxiety mitigation would provide lifetime work in schools, medicine, and the media. By the way, before the task force publishes the final version of its anxiety recommendations, the document will be available for public comment on the organization's website until October 17. To be clear, these recommendations are only indirectly about the disease of depression. They focus explicitly on generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, panic disorder, separation anxiety disorder, and phobias. Unmistakably, anxiety can become a pathway to disabling and destructive ailments. Moreover, the task force draft statement itself is refreshingly modest in its assertions of what science knows about anxiety or could achieve with mass screening. The panel concludes with moderate certainty that screening for anxiety in adults, including pregnant and postpartum persons, has a moderate net benefit. On here, it's going to be a new office at the AG. As to therapists and treatments, psychological intervention produces a small but statistically significant reduction in anxiety symptoms. Psychopharmacologic drugs, mainly antidepressants and benzodiazepines, it's a long word for me, benefit some people. But that raises an age-old question similar to administering drugs for ostensibly hyperactive boys in grade school. Would anxiety screening put many more millions on a lifetime regimen of pharmaceuticals? Bingo, bingo,
You
bingo,
can either
bingo.
get it from the kid down the street, or
Right.
go to the doctor and make sure that the insurance is paying for it.
It's a new industry.
It's a
It's an old
drugging.
industry.
It's an old industry. It's institutional drugging.
Just a new chapter. Unaddressed is how many primary care docs will want to add formalized anxiety tests to what hospital systems or insurers already ask them to do. One task force member, Dr. Lori P-B-E-R-T, Burt. I'm sure the P is silent.
Puberty?
Lori Burt did not address that for the New York Times, suggesting providers should do what they already do on a daily basis, juggle and prioritize. Perhaps the panel should next propose anxiety screening for doctors and nurses. That sounds like there should have been a what do they call it? Boom, boom. There you go. Snare trap? I can't.
Rim shot.
Rim shot. There you go. The first adopters are likely to be K through 12 public schools, whose teachers' unions would cheerfully add anxiety screeners to their expanding categories of membership. By the way, the task force notes that a positive screen for anxiety would then require a fuller confirming diagnosis. The screenings themselves, especially in schools, could become a source of dread. Yes, of course, the recommendation includes comments about race, wealth inequities, etc., and the panel exempts the 65-plus population, not because their lives are more settled by then, but because some symptoms of anxiety, such as sleeplessness or pain, overlap with the natural signs of aging or life. But I digress.
like from 8 to 65.
Right. This looks like a tide impossible to resist. We saw a great shift occurring away from calmer, more outward-looking lives towards predominantly self-directed obsessions when campuses created safe spaces for students who couldn't cope. The Preventive Service Task Force provides 30 footnotes of research behind its recommendations, but makes no attempt to explain how we arrived at a state of mass anxiety or what did this to us. The words social media and web appear nowhere, suggesting that for these doctors, the only clinically relevant issue now is how to treat this universal malady.
And I haven't heard anything in this where they looked at people who are chronic drug users, what made them turn to drugs in the first place. Because if anxiety is as widespread as they're saying it is, that's already the population that's affected.
People cope with those chemicals as well.
People who are abusing alcohol, people who are abusing, pharmaceuticals.
Still, it's sad to think that if we are helpless before the relentless salami slicer of daily life, mass psychological disorder is to be the unavoidable norm. One thing for sure, sellers of solutions will surf the anxiety wave. Mark Zuckerberg renamed Facebook as Meta because he believes the future will consist of people by the millions strapping on headsets to inhabit whatever me-only metaverse they wish to live in. Don't laugh. He's done okay already with one dystopia. Boom, boom, and that's it. Actually, a footnote, Meta is not doing too well these days, and we'll see how it goes in the next couple of months.
But they are trying to create alternate realities so that you can retreat into them and not have to deal with day-to-day.
The real life. Yeah, I've actually seen videos of people online in these meta universes in like comedy clubs. Instead of going out and engaging with real people, it's weird. It's like everyday stuff that they've created these worlds in.
But they're also collecting. That's also an industry. So someone's doing this for money. And I want to remind all of our listeners of a quotation from an earlier age, and that is, religion is the opiate of the people. And so there has been always, this is a human condition, that people are going to try to find relief from the pressures of everyday growing up and living.
And it'd be really great to find some that are chemical free, but that's the world we are right now, and that's what they talked about. But again, like this article said, the panel didn't speak to the reasons why. It just says they're here, and these are our solutions for it. We should be testing, and that's concerning.
I would love to see someone who knows how to do this dig back in those authors and the panel members and see how many of them are buying stock in pharmaceuticals.
Well, why? They didn't do it for the last pandemic. Why should they start now?
Oh, because if they're the ones promoting it,
right,
they should be investing while the stock is penny stock.
You're listening to Tall Tales here on KUSG 93.3 FM. Let's go to the 7th inning stretch, and we'll be right back with more Tall Tales right after this.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
Does your physical workplace have an impact on the mental outlook of workers, their overall job satisfaction, and their productivity? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about that and what you might want to do about it. It's The Extra Point here on 93.3.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point by Jerry Roberts at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point.
We're already Pica's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing The Point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
The 7th inning stretch, 2 more innings left in the program. You're listening to Tall Tales on 93.3 FM. You're also watching Tall Tales on YouTube and Facebook. Let's see here, do a little bit of cleanup here on our screen. We didn't get to watch the then citizen Lulian Guerrero's testimony against the Infant Right to Life Act that passed into a law, thankfully, that occurred in 2013. We will, of course, get to that on Friday, hopefully. We just had a lot of
today, right?
No, not today. That's fine.
Coming attractions.
There you go. But I want to talk about something. This is something that Bob said to me a couple days ago, and I think it's very interesting. With the overturning of Roe versus Wade in the Supreme Courts, that was the epitome of, or that might have seemed like it was the beginning of the battle of abortion all along the United States, and I've been a part. I've been able to talk to people about my pro-life or my anti-abortion stance. Most recently, because I wear this hat, if people have noticed, around on the show called 40 Days for Life. I'm not going to pitch anything to you guys to buy or sell or anything like that, but you can look up 40 Days for Life. There is a prayer campaign going on right now. This organization does prayer protests only, not political protests or anything else, in front of abortion clinics. And they pick certain times of the year where everybody gets together nationally. It's not just, internationally. It's not just in the United States. And they pray for 40 days. And it started, oh my gosh, I can't remember what it started in September last week. We're on day 7 right now. And the prayer and the rhetoric and the narrative has always been the same for many pro-life anti-abortionists. And that is, and this goes to Bob Klitzkie's question, when is it ever right to terminate the life, or when is it ever okay to terminate the life of a helpless human being? And that's never. And there's another article that he sent to me. I can't remember what website it's from. It might be LifeSite News, same where this article comes from, that talks about different laws that are going to be put up all throughout the United States, and compromises to abortion and abortion laws. And we'll get into that next week, maybe on Friday. because it is kind of comprehensive. It's actually part of a series of articles, and I want to make sure they all come out, and I read them all. I don't necessarily want to make this election an issue about abortion, because abortion is not a political issue, or it ought not be. It should be something that we keep in mind, the same way we keep in mind other crimes against humanity like murder and theft and robbery and things like that, because quite frankly, abortion is the termination of a human life. However, when it comes to the other side, the bars and the rhetoric and the goalposts have always been changing. I remember when we heard "My Body, My Choice." Then we heard what was the other one? Rare. Daryl, can you help me out on that one? Do you remember the abortion laws? We're not for abortion. We're pro-choice as long as they're rare, necessary, and something. It was some sort of three-pronged thing. And then when laws started coming out restricting abortion as far as weeks go, and then heartbeats and stuff like that, the rhetoric changed again to "this is my right, this is my body," and things like that. So apparently there's another goalpost change. This is being reported by ProSite News, and this is called on the card "pro-abortionists versus choice," something that used to be put together: pro-abortion and pro-choice.
You're starting to remind me again of this. I think it had to do with the dovetailing of the
rare, safe, and legal.
Women's rights.
Yeah.
The feminist movement in the 70s.
Right.
60s and 70s was when that
"My Body, My Choice" came out.
Yeah, when that started.
Right.
Yeah.
But the rare, safe, and legal, I think, was the terminology. The argument for having
and that was
abortion.
That was a medical standard.
Yeah, but it also became a motto or some sort of slogan. So anyways, this article came out in LifeSite News, and is titled "The Abortion Left Now Thinks My Body, My Choice is Offensive." The next time you hear "My Body, My Choice" screamed at you, it would be good to politely remind the activists that they are not supposed to say "my choice" anymore. It offends liberal women. Activists in the know, for example, are now using a more emphatic and clunkier "my body, my decision." In fact, liberal protesters, including Democratic Squad Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, Ilhan Omar, and Ayanna Pressley, chanted "my body, my decision" while walking to the Senate to ask for abortion rights on May 11th. It's official. The leftist site, The New Republic, reports that Planned Parenthood and radical feminists are expunging the use of choice from their lexicon. The move is surprising since choice has long been the weapon of choice in the feminist arsenal of words. It conveys the fuzzy idea of casual freedom that appeals to many people. And that's the problem. It's too casual. Everything must trigger a crisis in a woke climate of expanding sensitivity. The woke left is canceling choice because it's not radical enough to reflect the post-Dobbs times. Radicals claim pro-choice sounds too polite to frame the whole conversation about abortion. In casual conversation, choice signifies picking between two equal alternatives, like chocolate or vanilla. It insinuates that women make inconsequential decisions without deliberate thought, thus trivializing the issue and women in general. Choice is also too individualist. For a long time, feminists have claimed that abortion is an individual choice between the woman and her doctor. The new radicals now claim that choice erases the broader social and structural context surrounding the movement. One person does not a revolution make. Abortion cannot be reduced to a personal thing. It must be part of the larger progressive fight that involves all society, lest it becomes irrelevant. Indeed, choice is not sufficiently progressive. It does not allow for the racial equity and gender issues that intersect with the abortion fight. The present phase of the sexual revolution demands a broader approach to survive. A compelling reason to abandon the pro-choice label is that it does not correspond to the present political reality. Instead of clarifying the situation, the word choice serves to mask, obscure, or distort the plight of poor women. It spreads a sense of complacency about access that works against the abortion cause. Choice insinuates that any woman can get an abortion whenever and wherever she wants. However, pro-death activists rightfully note that the efforts of the pro-life movement has severely limited access to abortion. Fortunately, vast sectors of the nation, and now whole states, are blessed by being without abortion mills. Thus, a Planned Parenthood Action blog post notes the term choice does not represent the lived realities of people who face barriers that, of course, often compounded by racist and classist policies. Other activists complain that the term pro-choice serves as a cover for those who do not want to say openly that they are pro-abortion. By hiding behind the expression, the pro-choice person insinuates that, while at times needed, abortion is really not something good. It creates a climate of shame and silence that stigmatizes those who have had abortions. The New Republic, Harry Cheadle, describes the ability of cynical corporate leaders and rich liberals to co-opt words like choice to make it appear they are sufficiently woke. It's a dodge, a pathetic SOP, standard operating procedure, to the left from corporations and other powerful institutions, he claims. They assume that invoking on-trend progressive words and phrases will make up for all the injustice and misery they cause. According to this class struggle Marxist narrative, these liberal business elites are using the revolution against itself. They adeptly and cynically appropriate words like choice to virtue signal and benefit the management class. In this case, it's better to eliminate choice since it is irreparably compromised. Getting rid of the word choice marks a new phase in the pro-life battle in America. The pro-abortion side has long tried to repackage its nefarious message to appear more mainstream, pleasant, and normal. Adopting the word choice framed the debate as a woman's freedom issue, not the killing of innocent life. However, instead of mobilizing radical activists, the term created a class of soft supporters that saw abortion as a mere option and not a critical cause. Hence, the word must be discarded since it no longer aims to advance the sexual revolution. The pro-abortion movement now suggests a harsh replacement term, pro-abortion. No more masking, no more playing nice after Dobbs. It wants to out its moderates and force them to face the brutal reality by unapologetically making them say the forbidden A word. Thus, the Planned Parenthood Action blog recommends pro-abortion, pro-abortion rights, pro-abortion access, or pro-abortion equity. Abortion isn't a dirty word. And that's a quote. The abandonment of choice suggests the debate was never about choice. The dictatorial nature of the left forces its agenda upon everyone. It will not brook opposition. It demands compliance, and now it shows its hard face. After the Dobbs decision, this imperative to impose abortion upon the nation at any cost accelerated. It becomes clear that Americans are to be given no choice. Leave a legacy today.
That's a risky, I mean, that is a risky political move.
Mm-hmm.
Because you need the moderates in order to get a majority.
But that just pulled the facade. It pulled the mask right off.
The extremists are always going to do that. But when they co-opt the language, they do so at peril of losing the moderates.
But I'm like, to me, that's like the Brer Rabbit story here. I'm reading this as if it's being critical, but I'm like, go ahead and do it. I commend them for at least this piece of honesty. I commend them for at least being honest with their rhetoric finally, because it's never been about choice. It's always been about abortion. Because when you come up with when you actually look and study the two parties, when you come up with somebody who is anti-abortion, they actually have more choices in their arsenal of rhetoric than the pro-abortion is. The pro-abortion is just about abortion. That's all they are about. And when it comes down to real choices, they always sway people towards abortion, and that's what they're talking about.
You're talking about two different groups of people. There's one group that's advocates. There are another people who are finding themselves in the position of having to face this,
or having to satisfy the poor abortionists.
No, I'm talking about there are advocates and there are people in the situation that may need to turn to for medical care. They need to have prenatal care. They need to have access to medical care for because they're pregnant, and the
none of that has to do with
advocates
abortion,
are
though.
That's right. The advocates are advocating the access to abortion as one of the choices a woman who's bearing a child who faces a pregnancy can make. Those are completely different populations. One is advocating a policy. The other group is seeking medical care. And so what's happening is the advocates are cutting off access to the political center.
But at the same time, remember, and I know that a lot of people want to keep designating this as solely a political issue. Are we also going to, is the destruction of the Jews during World War II a political issue, or was it a human issue?
It was within the German state at the time.
At the time.
And that's what we're talking about here.
When we look at it as a whole, it's like, how dare you play politics with these people's lives this way?
And
we got to look at it in a better place. That's why I commend these pro-abortion activists for being on the face, quote unquote, honest now, and calling out those people who claim they're pro-choice but they would never have an abortion. That's like saying, I don't beat my wife, but I'm not going to stop other people from making that decision to do it on their own, because that's their decision, that's their business, none of my business.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to stop them.
You are
right?
absolutely right.
So you're either pro beating your wife or you're not. You're either pro-abortion or you're not. Right? That's what they're saying. That's what these people are saying. And I commend them.
And they're going to lose
I hope so.
They're going to lose the political center by doing this.
I hope so, because that's the truth of that movement. You listen to Tall Tales here on KUSG 93.3 FM. What say you? How is it that you would like to frame this issue? Again, it's politically, it's been taken off of the discussion block by committees who don't want to vote on issues because they might think it might sway the election. I'm talking about the Heartbeat Bill, the Heartbeat Act of Guam. It should have been taken out of committee a long time ago, but people are dragging their feet. I'm not going to name those people today, but when I find the name and list, I will list them out. They are part of Speaker Terlahi's committee.
And it is campaign time, and they deserve, as incumbents, they deserve to be called up on their
absolutely,
on who and where they are.
And I want to know why it's being held up in committee right now. Why is it that they can't have enough courage to come out and put it to a vote so that we see where they're at on whether a helpless human being, innocent human being, deserves a chance at life because their heartbeat is detected?
However that policy decision or option is framed, we should know where they stand on it.
There's lots of people who did not want to have the debate at all. By that I mean I said they don't want to even have the public commenting, which I thought was incredible. I want to give Speaker Terlahi props on reiterating the law that she has to have a public hearing and not just a simple roundtable on this. But at the same time, that time is over, and it needs to be put up to a vote. And whether it goes one way or the other, I want to know who my representatives, who they are supporting.
It's one of the reasons why I keep harping on it's campaign time, because this campaign season is, I cannot recall a quieter season.
Look at the title. It's October. Do you know where is the 2022 campaign? The loudest campaign we've heard so far, and that's just because they had a debate recently, and a writing candidate is the AG.
AG.
And that's it.
And that's ridiculous.
It is.
Have we?
And let me tell you, Camacho Ada, the Tenorio campaign, the Tenorio team is off island right now. This is your opportunity to make the Leon Guerrero Tenorio campaign.
Right. Okay.
Both of them are off island, I assume, because they're in the news at all these other conferences.
So Therese is acting?
I have no idea. That's a good question. Did she extend
We
the
don't
public?
even know who's acting?
Did she extend the public emergency? Did she stop it?
She can't she?
Let's go to Churchill Downs, Daryl, and we'll be right back with more Tall Tales here on KUSG 93.3 FM, The Point.
Wow, from 100 years ago.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Attention all passengers. This is your pre-boarding announcement for flight UOG EF40, scheduled for departure on Saturday, October 8th for our gala destination at the Dusitani Guam Resort. Passenger check-in time is 5 p.m. Your onboard entertainment will be a reunion of the casuals with Jesse and Ruby. For ticketing information, please call our agents at 671-735-2957. We thank you for choosing to fly with the UOG Endowment Foundation. Enjoy your flight with Tritons transforming the world.
The final stretch, the home stretch. We have just a few minutes left. No, we have about 12 minutes left before
good chunk of time.
Before the end of this edition of Tall Tales on a Monday. And we do have somebody in the green room. See, Dr. Ron McNitch wants to talk about the right to life. Oh, there we go. Good afternoon, Dr. Ron McNitch.
Hey, happy day, Jose. Happy day, Guam.
How you doing?
You know, the thing that bothers me the most, I mean, absolutely the most, about the current right to life, you know, going back and forth in the Dobbs decision is the blatant and simply unchecked threats made against our judges in the judiciary.
I absolutely 100% agree with you.
I mean, a person can disagree with a judge, but a judge has a job. And judges are to be dispassionate and rule according to the law. And if you don't like what a judge has to say, have the courage to change the law.
Right, but not at the bench.
Or appeal.
Or appeal, right?
Right. But in the case of the Supreme Court, and President Biden or whoever is in charge refusing to protect the justices at their homes really bothers me.
Mm-hmm. It was very interesting because in that Washington Post article that I was reading, they very lightly talked about the barriers surrounding the courthouse, without even mentioning the reasons why or the parties involved. I mean, there was definitely threats being made, but you're right. They hardly had anybody guarding the courthouse to those direct threats, and they're on. I think they're still ongoing. They probably started up again because they went back into session earlier today, I guess, or going to be going into
the October session, right?
Yeah,
I think it's today. It's October 3rd. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, just people can disagree with the judicial decisions, and they can lobby to have alternate laws if they want to, if they can get the votes for it. But attacking judges in terms of crowding their neighborhoods, trying to threaten them, and I want to find out who leaked the Dobbs decision.
Yeah.
I want to know, who and why.
We may never know.
That person is, we need to know.
Yeah, we may never know.
Because the system should not work this way. It should be, there was a deliberative process within the judges circulating that opinion, and the opinion might have been different than ultimately released if they'd simply left the process alone.
Well, see, I think, and I'm going to ask you your opinion on this, or your take on this. The justices did not render an opinion in the sense that they rendered their own personal opinion on the case. They rendered an opinion based on what they thought the Constitution said or didn't say, and they brought that issue back to the states. So I can tell you that the grand majority of people in the pro-life, anti-abortion movement did celebrate the overturn of Roe versus Wade, but it was incredibly temporary because then we understood the incredible job it was going to take to now convince each and that individual state, which is bigger than trying to convince one federal government. And that's what's going on right now. And people that don't understand Roe versus Wade don't understand that decisions were not taken away. They were given back to where it ought to be, to you.
You know what drives you crazy about the Roe decision? And first of all, nobody ever reads the Roe decision. It's only 21 pages long. The Dobbs decision was 10 times longer. It was over 200, 220 almost. The thing is, if you look at the facts of the Roe case, the lady in Texas, gosh, I've forgotten her name now. I haven't looked at this case in a while. She was almost 7 months pregnant, and she simply didn't want to have the baby and wait 2 more months. Purely because she's arguing apparently with her mom, and her mother had already adopted her first baby, and then she put her second baby up for adoption. And so this baby, at nearly 7 months, she wanted to abort the child, and now that woman's living in Arizona as a grandmother. That's how long ago Roe was. It was extremely problematic as a policy because of the way black men reasoned it. And it was just very weak. I used to teach the Roe case back when it was a good case in constitutional law and tell all of my students, sooner or later, Roe's going to fall because it's extremely weak. They're either going to have to pass a law or it's going to get overruled. It was just that weak of a case. It wasn't this, like Brown versus Board of Education, that's an absolute, hard rock foundation case. Roe versus Wade was it was like a sandcastle.
Yeah, and that's, again, the one thing that I know about Roe versus Wade, you're right, the person who was designated as Roe, right? The anonymous woman ended up having the child anyways. She didn't completely understand what she was being brought in for. She has converted since. She did pass away a number of years ago, probably the past 10 years or so.
She became very anti-abortion.
Yes.
After she realized how she'd been pretty much manipulated by these folks.
Right. And again, that's why I appreciate this new movement to now use terminology that they ought to have been using this whole time. Say what you really want to say. There is a faction of people who don't care about that life, and so they will call it clump of cells. They'll call it abortion, and we're going to come to a point where we're going to get mainstream articles and opinion pieces of people who say, okay, so I am about terminating the life of somebody who doesn't have a voice. And we're seeing that all throughout online social media of people who are not afraid to give that in interviews. Yeah, so I'm going to argue that someone who doesn't have a voice, who can't speak for themselves, ought not have a right to life or a decision in the matter. And I'm kind of flabbergasted that those kind of people, those kind of rhetoric and narratives are being brought out in the open in public. Before, it used to be suppressed. Like you said, Daryl, people didn't want to talk about it.
Let me add my 2 cents worth if we're going to redefine things. If you're going to redefine it as infanticide, because that's what it is.
Yep.
Yes, it is. And you can then, if you're going to advocate for infanticide, then you can also go for other types of assisted death and stuff like that.
Well, that's what I think might lead to it. And again, not just for purely political reasons, but astonishing reasons that our own governor now, as a private citizen, testified in support of against a bill that would prevent infanticide. And it just confounds me that there were a number of people who voted against this bill.
And we'll play that on Friday.
Yeah, we'll play that on Friday. But, Doc, thank you for calling in.
Hey, great show, guys.
Real quick, though, I know that you were in the front page. You're in the top of the fold.
That's me.
I have to ask you a question because it wasn't stated in the article. Was there ever an ethical complaint submitted to the Ethics Commission itself?
I think it was. It just wasn't sworn. The guy, according to the standard, you've got to write it, sign it, and swear to it. So he didn't swear to it. So I don't think he made a legitimate complaint because the standard's very clear.
Now, I don't know if the Ethics Commission has to go through the same standards as a court, but we all know that cases get won on technicalities or lost on technicalities, not so much on whether they're right or wrong. And I think that's a big technicality if nothing was really submitted properly.
Right. And not only that, here's another thing. I'm willing to tell anybody what was said in that room. I basically said, if a person's not filing big money donations through the financial process in the election commission, there's something wrong. And by the way, this had nothing to do with I mention writing candidate stuff all the time too, but it wasn't, the focus wasn't that. It was, I'm concerned about dark money. That's what I'm worried about.
Right. And honestly, to me, I want to see the process from number one start before we even start debating what the merits of the ethics complaint are if it hasn't been properly processed to begin with. So that's just my point.
If somebody wants to swear out a complaint, I'll handle it from the standpoint of swearing out a complaint, which has specific legal ramifications.
Right. And when that happens, if that happens, we'll probably be sure to talk about it here on Tall Tales.
Yeah, but this is campaign time.
This is campaign time. All right. Thanks for calling in, Doc. Have a great day.
Oh, you guys are always fun during campaign season. In fact, you're fun anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So what? I'm here to make you laugh. I'm just funny how? Funny haha. Anyways.
But we're doing our level best.
I misquote all the time, but my intentions are good.
They are.
You're listening to Tall Tales. We have a couple of minutes left. I don't. There's a lot of stuff on Facebook that I'm not sure if I want to. Here we go. Bonnie Suba, who says the Democrats want to pack the courts and they don't want any conservatives on the bench, and that is the truth, not an opinion. Because
it's a given.
They've stated it. They stated as much.
And the other, and this
many times,
and the converse as well.
No, conservatives don't want to stack the courts.
No, I'm not talking about stacking the courts. I'm talking about when
no liberals on the bench.
When you can put your own on the bench, you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. But
some candidates ran specifically with that as a platform plank.
Yeah, and that's a really don't vote for those people because they don't understand government. Again, there's a lot of us here that have basic knowledge of government, and when that basic knowledge is being turned overhead by someone who's running for office, then you already know that everything else doesn't
But there
fall
are some candidates who specifically ran saying, if I get in, I'm going to make sure that that a conservative is put on the bench.
That's fine. The way the world ought to be. Just kidding.
But that's the political tie-in. It's not the
right
result.
now,
It's that it was the process begins as a political process.
But right now, I'm interested in the relations between this island and Washington D.C. When I say greet our president, let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
I'm Laura Cantor, Fox News. President Biden vowing to provide assistance to the areas devastated by Hurricanes Fiona and Ian for the long haul. The president and First Lady Jill Biden will be traveling to Fiona-stricken Puerto Rico on Monday and Florida, which was slammed by Hurricane Ian, on Wednesday. Fox's Chad Pergram has more.
It's a balance for presidents not to get in the way of storm recovery, but they must time when they go on site to show leadership. There are still concerns about rising floodwaters, and there's worry about what happens when sodden communities receive showers from a regular storm. Congress just approved money to flush FEMA's coffers with cash in an interim spending bill on Friday. It's likely Congress will need to approve more cash for Puerto Rico and Florida after the damage assessments are complete.
The total amount of money needed for the recovery effort for Hurricane Ian is not known yet. Florida Republican Congressman Byron Donalds says it could be around $5 billion. Ukrainian forces recapturing the city of Lyman after it was annexed by Russia, a move deemed by other countries to be illegal. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg praises Ukraine's advancements on NBC's Meet the Press.
We have seen that they have been able to take a new town, Lyman, that demonstrates that the Ukrainians are making progress, are able to push back the Russian forces because of their courage, because of their bravery, their skills, but of course also because of the advanced weapons that the United States and other allies are providing. And this is making a difference on the battlefield every day.
A stampede at a soccer match in Indonesia Saturday night leaves at least 125 people dead, including 17 children. Far-right incumbent Jair Bolsonaro will face leftist former President Lula da Silva in October 30th runoff in Brazil's presidential election. America is listening to Fox News.
Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen, then swipe right and hear the latest news updates on your time. And scroll down to hear the latest podcasts from Fox News. And it's even easier to listen in the car with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Get programming alerts and notifications. Fox News Audio is on the Fox News app. The voices America trusts. Download it now. From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
I'm Ben Domenech, Fox News contributor and editor of the Transom.com daily newsletter, and I'm inviting you to join a conversation every week with the smartest thinkers out there about the issues Americans face and where we are going as a nation. This show will feature deep dive interviews with newsmakers and some of your favorite Fox News analysts. I hope you'll join me as we dive into the fray. It's the Ben Domenech Podcast.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you download podcasts.
The Supreme Court's new term begins today. Fox's Jessica Rosenthal reports.
Today marks Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's first term as a Supreme Court justice. The first case the court will consider has to do with whether the EPA has the authority to claim the Clean Water Act applies to an Idaho couple's plans for a piece of property the EPA says is technically wetlands. But there are other critical cases on the calendar, including two that could result in an end to affirmative action on public and private college campuses. Two other cases pertain to elections. One is a challenge to North Carolina's redistricting and whether gerrymandering violated the state constitution. Another case out of Alabama alleges the redrawing of congressional districts violated the Voting Rights Act.
A man accused of killing 22 elderly women goes on trial again. Fox's Shayna Estelin has the story.
He's already been convicted of killing one woman, and on Monday, the next capital trial for Billy Shamirmir begins in Dallas. Prosecutors accuse the Kenyan-born 49-year-old of targeting older women, mostly in independent living facilities, and smothering them to death, all to steal some of their jewelry. Earlier this year, he was sentenced to life in prison for killing an 81-year-old woman, faces the same sentence if convicted in this trial in the murder of an 87-year-old in 2018. He was arrested after one of his victims survived, cops finding him at his apartment complex with cash and jewelry in hand. He claims that he's innocent.
An escaped inmate is located at his birthday party.
That inmate, Forenza Rakeem Murphy, was captured in Georgia at his own birthday party. Murphy escaping from a Connecticut halfway house in early August where he was serving time for robbery. Deputies in Georgia getting a tip that the 31-year-old was spotted nearby. They wound up finding him at his relative's house celebrating his own birthday party. Murphy was arrested on site and now faces additional charges.
That's Fox's Paul Stevens. I'm Laura Cantor, Fox News.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
Your new News Talk headquarters.
You're on the air.
This could be very interesting.
The next level.
This is The Point.
This is House Call for Health. 4 in 5 pregnancy-related deaths in the U.S. are preventable. That result from a report of the Maternal Mortality Review Committee, which went over 2 years of data on pregnancy-related deaths, finding more than half happened up to 1 year after delivery. The top causes of these deaths related to mental health conditions, including death by suicide, followed by excessive bleeding, cardiac and coronary conditions. The study also found Black mothers, who are 3 times as likely as white mothers to die, made up close to a third of deaths from 2017 to 2019. The head of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Division of Reproductive Health says the results show we need to improve initiatives in states, hospitals, and communities to make sure all pregnant or postpartum women get the help they need at the right time. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health, I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News.
Hi there, and good evening, and welcome to the Jim Bohannon Show from Westwood One Radio. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Online, find us at JimBohannonShow.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Jimbo Talks. And we're joined again this evening by Gil Barndollar, Senior Fellow at DefensePriorities.org, to see what's happening in the latest war of words between the United States and Russia. Good evening, Gil.
Evening. How are you, Jim?
Okay, fine enough. Just how serious are these words? As they say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, that depends on who's uttering the words, I suppose. How serious a threat do you feel the latest words of Vladimir Putin are, in particular regarding the annexation of portions of Ukraine and his promise to therefore defend any action against those portions as if they were a part of Russia always and forever?
Yeah, I think it's an important turning point. Might be a little too strong, but it's an important moment in the war. I think that it's. I would discount, kind of to your point, I would discount a little bit Putin's words, especially some of the nuclear threats, just on their face, given how much that's already happened. There have been repeated Russian threats, do this and that throughout the war, and very few have been carried out. But the move to annex these conquered, or most of them, some of them aren't even in Russian hands anymore, but these conquered Ukrainian territories, that's real, and that I think it closes a door almost completely, in the sense that once this is now, according to the Russians, not according to anybody else. I mean, I don't even think the Chinese will recognize this. But according to the Russians, this is now Russian territory. That opens up, tactically, it opens up a few things in terms of the use of conscripted Russian troops on what's now supposedly Russian territory. It makes the nuclear threat a little stronger in some ways. That action, I think, is more meaningful than maybe some of the rhetoric around it.
Yeah, I'm curious about what apparently has been something of a breakdown on this subject of Ukraine and the ties between Russia and China. Certainly during the Cold War, Russia and China were allies, with Russia very much the senior partner. And these days, I guess a lot of us had the impression that the alliance is back, only the role of senior and junior partner had switched. do you think that the Chinese possess anything that remotely approaches a veto over Russian actions?
No, I don't think so. Not yet. I mean, that's been tossed around. I'd be cautious of treating Russia and China as a bloc or as allies. I mean, certainly they've worked together, have increasingly close ties over the past, decade plus, and both of them want a revision in terms of the kind of the structure of the international system, right? Albeit for different reasons and for different things in some ways. But there's a lot of overlap there. But they're certainly not allies. And I think my sense is the Chinese are increasingly leery of where this war is going and what it's doing to the global economy. I mean, ultimately, China has plenty of its own problems, as we've been seeing in particular the last kind of 12, 24, 36 months. China's handling of COVID, I think, has been a mess. We don't even know fully how bad that is. And then the Chinese economy is slowing down, and I think people are always predicting the fall of the communist regime. It's like the old parlor game with the Saudi monarchy. I wouldn't go anywhere near that level, but I do think China has probably potentially a lot of economic landmines that we don't really understand or know about. So I think the Chinese don't want to be bearing the bill for Russia's war, and I think they're cautious about this. They certainly haven't been, rearming the Russians wholesale or anything like that, which is some people's fears at the outset of this war.
Back when Vladimir Putin visited Beijing during the Beijing Olympics, and I was wondering if the following conversation might have taken place, that President Xi of China had simply said, "Look, don't mess up our Olympic Games. We put a lot of effort into this. After that, you want Ukraine, take it." And I was of the opinion, not a firm opinion, but the possible opinion, that the minute the Russians made a move on Ukraine, that the Chinese would make a move on Taiwan and essentially tell the United States, well, two crises, two parts of the world, you up to this? And of course, the Chinese did no such thing other than a few of the usual saber-rattling provocations, but they certainly didn't invade Taiwan. Was there ever, you think, any linkage between the Russian action against Ukraine and Chinese action against Taiwan?
I think, personally, my view is that's pretty tenuous. I don't. I guess I would contrast it this way. As far as the, what Putin might have said or how much the Chinese knew about the Ukraine invasion in advance, I'm not sure, and I don't think anyone really knows besides a handful of people. But I do think two things on China and Taiwan. One, I think China's military capabilities and especially capacity to do that are overstated. I mean, I think it would be very much an open question, even as bad as Taiwanese defenses are and as little as they spend on defense and as much as their military has a lot of problems. That something of that kind of operation of that magnitude, even crossing 70 miles of water, not huge, but taking over a country of 23 million people in an amphibious and potentially airborne invasion, that's a huge thing. And I guess the other, and I'm not sure the Chinese can do it yet. I'm not sure they're confident they could do it yet. And the second piece, I would say, one thing that strikes me, I'm not by any stretch a full-time sinologist, but I think the pattern of Chinese leadership and Xi as well, when you compare that to Putin, almost, maybe not quite night and day, but a huge difference in that Putin is a gambler. The old cliche is Putin's a gambler playing a weak hand. I think it's a cliche, but it's more true than not. The Chinese are very cautious. I think the Chinese communist regime prizes internal stability above all else. I don't think they're not rushing into anything. China has been economically, booming and ascendant for a decade plus now, really 20 plus years. So I think the Chinese are not in any hurry, whereas the Russians obviously had the exact opposite. Have a country demographically, economically, at best, kind of flatlined, in some ways still going downhill. So I think those two countries think and make decisions and make strategic decisions and calculate risk in a very different way.
Yeah. A question about each of these leaders. How secure is each? President Xi of China, first of all. How secure is he in that position? Obviously, he doesn't have to worry about losing the Shanghai primary, but how secure is he with the Politburo?
I mean, again, not totally my area, but I think certainly Xi is a lot more secure than Putin is. I mean, I think there were some weird rumors, and I didn't really see anything credible on this a week or so ago. I don't know if you saw this. There was this kind of online rumor mill thing about Xi, about a potential coup in China and all of this. And I think some of the some of the Western, obviously China's kicked out a lot of Western media, but some Western observers on the ground kind of quickly poo-pooed that and said, you all are making mountains out of molehills here as far as some canceled flights and some other minor stuff, trying to build a narrative out of that. But China's a much more closed-off society to the West than it was, a few years ago. The Chinese have cracked down in a lot of ways. They've apparently had some successes against U.S. intelligence. So we know a lot less about, I think, decision-making at the highest reaches of the Chinese state than we do for almost any other major regime on earth. The Russians, it's an open question as well, but certainly this partial mobilization, you can see why Putin was so reticent about this. People have been saying, and even hardliners in his own country have been saying for months, we need to mobilize, we need to pull up the reserves, which aren't really reserves at all, not in the way we think of them. It's just guys that had done a prior conscript term. They'd served for a year in the past. They weren't drilling reservists or had any real, in 99% of the cases, that had no military experience after taking off the uniform. But you can see what that's done. I mean, there've been protests and riots all across Russia. Hundreds, 100,000 plus, probably a couple thousand, probably 200,000 Russian young men have left the country. Most of them going to Georgia, Armenia, countries that'll have them. The British Ministry of Defense calculate they claim that more Russian men have left the country than have fought in the war in Ukraine to date, which is kind of staggering.
Yeah, how secure is Putin? I mean, there's no communist ideology there anymore. It's sort of a state of gangster capitalism. The idea of a coup back when communism ruled the Kremlin was not out of the question, but very unlikely. And now, there's no ideology there other than Vlad's the guy who wound up with the most people supporting him. But again, there's no popular electoral support. How secure is he?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. I would just say that obviously it's a very personalist regime, right? It's an authoritarian and especially post-February, an increasingly autocratic regime. Putin has periodically gotten rid of rivals, whether it's someone like Navalny that's in jail or whether it's Medvedev, who was kind of briefly theoretically in charge, but was always kind of seen as Putin's lapdog and is now kind of outdoes Putin in his rhetoric. There aren't, Politico actually, I think it was Politico EU, which does some really good work, had a piece kind of running down other possible contenders should Putin be shoved aside. I don't think it's out of the question though. I think it certainly, as you said, during Soviet times it happened. Khrushchev was done away with by coup. Right after Stalin died, they made that comic movie about it, the death of Stalin. They got rid of Beria very quickly. So that stuff happened in Soviet times. It wasn't unheard of. I would say that if it happens in Russia, my suspicion is it's going to be much more about the security services, the FSB and the intelligence, the domestic security services, and the oligarchs than it is about the military. I don't think of the military as a huge political actor there.
Okay. Marlon in San Francisco. Hello.
Yeah, thank you, Jimbo. I have a question here. I hear that Zelensky is applying for the NATO application, and if it goes through, and the other NATO members will be supporting Ukraine, do you think that Russia is going to ask China to join forces to fight against Ukraine?
Well, of course, the Chinese, I'm not sure the Chinese have the capability of projecting their forces that far away from China. But personally, I don't think it's very likely that until this Ukraine issue is settled one way or the other, I don't think, I can, for example, see if it looks as though the Russians will hang on to the eastern portion of Ukraine, I could see the remnants, the western part of Ukraine, applying for NATO membership. But I just don't see that happening right now, Gil.
Yeah, no, I think that's a dead letter. We had Ukraine and Georgia have been sort of in this stalled kind of potential membership thing for a long time now. And it's NATO. You need unanimous vote, right? Like even Finland and Sweden, which have no border issues or conflicts with Russia, which are very democratic, secure, and actually increasingly well-armed states. Even those two almost got blocked by both the Turks and the Croatians. It looks like they'll both get in. So with unanimous consent, I think the Germans, the French, the Italians, they're probably many, if not half of NATO, many members would veto that. So I'm not particularly worried about that or concerned about that in the short term. And I don't think it's necessary, obviously, for the United States and other countries to help Ukraine, for the country to be in the alliance. It opens some really dangerous doors as far as escalation.
Yeah. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626 with Gil Barndollar of DefensePriorities.org. Back in a moment.
So in life throws you uh-ohs, just say, better get Mako.
Go to Mako.com for an online estimate today.
Ad paid for by the Sentinel Group. Attention Marines, military personnel, families, and contractors who were stationed at Camp Lejeune. Were you present at Camp Lejeune between August 1953 and December of 1987? You may be entitled to significant compensation. For nearly 34 years, those in the Marine Corps' base Camp Lejeune were exposed to contaminated drinking water, resulting in devastating injuries, including several forms of cancer, adverse birth outcomes, Parkinson's disease, and more. North Carolina's procedural laws have prevented victims from getting the justice they deserve, but passage of the Camp Lejeune Justice Act of 2022 would allow you or a loved one to file lawsuit seeking compensation for illnesses and injuries linked to the toxic water. Call today for your free consultation. 800-805-0522. Let our experienced attorneys fight to get you the compensation you deserve, and you pay nothing unless there's a recovery in your favor. Call 800-805-0522. That's 800-805-0522. Again, 800-805-0522.
The NFL is committed to sticking to your game plan and always betting responsibly. If you bet, remember to set your limits, never chase your losses, and only bet what you can afford to lose. To learn more about responsible betting and discover resources to help build your game plan, visit responsibleplay.org. If you or someone you know may have a gambling problem, please call or text the following 24-hour confidential helpline, 1-800-GAMBLER.
My heart was racing just making spaghetti. I could have waited to tell my doctor, but I didn't wait.
I was short of breath just reading a book. I could have delayed telling my doctor, but I didn't wait.
They told their doctors and found out they have atrial fibrillation, a condition which makes it about 5 times more likely to have a stroke. If you have one or more of these symptoms, irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain, shortness of breath, fatigue, or lightheadedness, this is no time to wait. Contact your doctor.
Brought to you by Bristol-Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
The best part about taking ZQuil Pure Z's Sleep Plus Next Day Energy at night is actually the next morning. I wake up alert with none of the grogginess from taking too much melatonin. Pure Z Sleep Plus Next Day Energy is a bilayer tablet with immediate release melatonin and extended release B vitamins to help me fall asleep naturally and wake refreshed. It's my secret weapon for a great night's sleep and a great morning.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Mom.
Can't beat that.
ZQuil Pure Z's Gummies. Sleep better, wake your best.
The uh-ohs are out there. Scratches, dents, unexpected natural events. But with Mako and their magic, your car is no longer tragic. So when life throws you uh-ohs, just say,
better get Mako.
And go to Mako.com to book your appointment today.
We're announcing new sanctions today as well, that including new authorities to sanction anyone who provides political or economic support to Russia's fraudulent territorial claims.
And President Biden, of course, during remarks this past day in response to the latest words from his Russian counterpart. Gil Barndollar is our guest, senior fellow at DefensePriorities.org. Your thoughts on both what Putin said and what Biden replied with?
Yeah, I think President Biden, to take those in reverse order, I guess President Biden has walked a fine line, and there've been times throughout this crisis, this war over the last 6 months, where he's definitely kind of put his foot in his mouth and followed his sort of pattern he's had for his career of saying things that sort of had to be walked back or had to be mitigated or worked around by his staff. At the same time, I think the overall tone the administration has taken, and including the president, has been largely right to me, which is that we have a couple of big red lines in both directions, both from the Russians and towards the Russians, and not no direct U.S. engagement in this war is one of them, but otherwise we're supporting the Ukrainians to the hilt and kind of leading a coalition that's doing so. On the other hand, on the Russian side, I think the Russian rhetoric has gotten increasingly bellicose, increasingly oriented around this kind of framing of Russia against the West, Russia against NATO, not just Russia against the Ukrainians. And Putin hit those notes again, I think, with kind of more vigor and more force in this latest speech. And that's, on the one hand, as I said kind of earlier in the show, in some ways talk is cheap. On the other hand, anything like that is unsettling to hear from, a country that's facing us with nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Speaking of walking things back, just to switch over to China and Taiwan for the moment. Now, for the third or fourth time, I've lost count, President Biden has publicly stated unequivocally that United States forces, U.S. personnel, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, what have you, would actively defend Taiwan against an attack by China. In fact, this latest episode occurred on 60 Minutes when correspondent Scott Pelley, in essence, gave him a chance to walk himself back. And he rejected it. He doubled down, made it abundantly clear. And then, of course, later that he, Biden, believes U.S. forces would be actively engaged, not just providing support or weaponry, but actively fighting the Chinese. And then, of course, later the White House again walked that back. There's been no change in U.S. policy, et cetera, and so on. In fact, the gymnastics, the rhetorical gymnastics employed by the White House at times would be almost funny if the subject matter wasn't so serious. The extent to which they've tried to convince all of us that, in fact, there's been no policy change. So I'm curious, if the president says something, is that not U.S. foreign policy? I mean, I'm not sure that all of his aides and his staff necessarily are in a position to walk that back, are they? I mean, isn't the president the ultimate definer of U.S. policy?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I basically agree with you. It's, as you said, he's been offered chances to walk it back. This has happened repeatedly. The only question, I guess, the big question is the extent to which you think this is malapropisms or this is the president freelancing, and to what extent this is the policy of his administration. It's a question of how much they're stating it out loud or how much they're not. So given the fact that he keeps saying this, I think it's pretty clear what his orientation is. And we have the way the U.S. system is structured, the president has tremendous power in foreign policy. I mean, other than the purse strings being held by Congress, and especially given what's happened with the War Powers Act over the last 20 years since 9/11, that's only made things worse. So, I mean, the president has certainly kind of put his foot down there and made a statement, as you said repeatedly, and kind of put that line in the sand. So what I would hope would happen in response to that is we would have a real debate about this in this country, and it may not probably would not break down on neat political lines or partisan lines. But if we are putting ourselves in a position to fight a war over Taiwan and right off the Chinese coast, the American people should be crystal clear on what that looks like, and that's a commitment we're making.
Yeah. And we'd better be crystal clear that we have the capability of doing it too. I mean, if that's really our policy, I mean, are we ready?
Yeah, I guess to what I said earlier, I don't think we're ready, but I don't think the Chinese are ready either. There's been a series of war games put on recently, and those war games are war games. But I think almost anyone looking at it thinks, at a minimum, even if the U.S. were to emerge victorious, it'd be extremely bloody. Not like nothing we've experienced since Vietnam in raw numbers, and since World War II in terms of the intensity of the conflict, and it would be obviously a naval and air conflict for the U.S. for the most part.
Yeah. All right. More to come with our guest, Gil Barndollar, Senior Fellow at DefensePriorities.org. And we're looking at some of the trouble spots in this old world of ours. I know we've had a lot of focus of late, of course, on Hurricane Ian and the midterm elections, as correctly we should. But there's a world out there, and it isn't always nice. Back in a moment.
The IRS, the world's most aggressive collection agency. They can seize your property, bank account, and garnish your wages. They cause sleepless nights for millions of Americans. Don't be one of them. If you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS or state, get protected today. Call 800-312-9970. Coast One Tax Group, protecting your bank, home, and your sleep since 2008. With hundreds of 5-star reviews and an A+ on the Better Business Bureau. Call Coast One Tax Group, 800-312-9970. 312-9970. Stanley from New York owed $93,000. The IRS placed a levy on his bank account. Coast One released the levy and settled with the IRS for $2,000. Mark in Michigan owed $225,000. After Coast One stepped in, Mark walked away paying less than $1,500. Call Coast One now. A 10-minute call can save you up to 93% on your back taxes. Get your fresh start today. That's 800-312-9970.
When I got out of the Marine Corps, I was not just, working with my physical disabilities, I was emotionally broken. I remember thinking, how did I get here? How? It was affecting me in my marriage. My husband, he didn't know how to help me. He actually called Wounded Warrior Project. Wounded Warrior Project had this thing called Couples Odyssey.
It was an eye-opener, and I think it really saved our marriage.
They gave us books and resources and tools on how to help us with that. I just love him. I love you, honey.
Me too. Watching her fight for her mental health, fighting for other veterans, fighting for this family, helped me to fight too. Wow.
And new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. U.S. Tax Shield offers a price protection guaranteed quote to get you protected today. U.S. Tax Shield is A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau, so call now. 800-785-9132. That's 800-785-9132. U.S. Tax Shield. 800-785-9132. 132.
America is fully prepared with our NATO allies to defend every single inch of NATO territory. Every single inch. So, Mr. Putin, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Every inch.
Which, if you read it literally, Gil Barndollar, it changes nothing since NATO territory isn't in question at this time. And as we've already discussed, it's highly unlikely that Ukraine, as currently constituted, would become a member of NATO. So that sounds, I think, a lot more bellicose than it actually is.
Yeah, I think there's just always the concern, given the degree to which Russia has sort of escalated in Russian actions during this war. Now the latest, the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines, which is being blamed on Russia, I think probably rightly. I guess there's maybe a little bit of a question of how far Putin will go. I don't think there's a huge danger of the war escalating onto NATO territory. But that's still a concern in the back of the mind.
Yeah. 1-866-50-JIMBO, and here's Jim in Marysville, Washington. Good evening.
I believe I saw the president of Ukraine sign paper today to speed up Ukraine's inclusion into NATO. I'd like to know what the guest feels the implications are. Thank you.
Well, I mean, he can't buy his way in or anything else. I mean, I'm not sure what these papers were, but I'm not even sure that Ukraine has made a formal application for NATO membership. And if so, as we've just discussed, I think it's highly unlikely, and I think Gil does too, that NATO would admit Ukraine. So I don't think it means much of anything, whatever it was that he signed. Gil?
Yeah, I think it's symbolic, and I think the Ukrainians, and I don't blame them one bit, but they're gonna ask for the moon. They've done the same thing with weapons in terms of asking for as much as possible and getting a fair bit less than that. Although, even though the level of armament of the Ukrainian military by the U.S. and by other NATO members has been really substantial. So, I don't view this as a serious thing that changes the terms of debate or changes Ukraine's relationship with the alliance, certainly in the short term.
Let's turn back to China one more time here, not to jump all over the map, but much has been said about in dealing with China and Taiwan that we have over the years tried to deal in strategic ambiguity. That is to say, keep the Chinese guessing as to what we really plan to do or would be willing to do. There was nothing ambiguous at all about what President Biden said on 60 Minutes, even given the chance to walk himself back. So your thoughts about strategic ambiguity and whether or not we're following it at all?
Yeah, I think we're certainly moving away from it, and that's partly propelled by power dynamics and by China, but certainly partly propelled by us as well. I think on balance, I think strategic ambiguity has served us well. I think we need to be very cautious about where we go from here, and I think we need to have an honest conversation about whether we should be willing to fight a war over Taiwan and whether that's a commitment the United States should take with all of the massive consequences that would follow from that, or whether we think this is going to deter the Chinese. And I question whether there are a lot of benefits to whether the benefits outweigh the risks in terms of getting rid of strategic ambiguity.
Mm-hmm. Let's turn to that pipeline in the Baltic Sea, which apparently was blown up by Russia. And there's some things about that I don't quite understand. First of all, wouldn't this essentially teach Europe, Western Europe, once and for all that you can't depend on Russia for energy? And just because it seemed like a cheap source of energy at one point, maybe if Western Europe ever gets a third digit to its IQ, they will figure out that that wasn't such a smart idea.
Yeah, I think we're already there. I mean, it's there's the short-term problem and the long-term problem. The short-term problem is getting through this winter without, massive economic consequences in Europe and in some countries in Europe more than others, Germany being kind of foremost. There's that problem, and there's the longer-term problem of replacing the Russian oil and gas, especially the natural gas. And things are spinning up on that, but the natural gas market is not nearly as fungible and as agile as the global oil market. So two separate things, but I think fundamentally the Europeans have learned their lesson there. It's just a question of disentangling themselves without suffering grievous economic harm, especially in the short term.
And also something else I heard the other day that I wasn't quite sure what I heard. I wasn't really paying attention to the TV at that particular moment. But I thought I heard it said that Norway is prepared to provide most of Western Europe's natural gas needs for the winter. Did I hear that?
No. If it's Norway, it would be more oil than gas. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't think the Norwegians are able to just back that bill quite like that. If they do, it's going to, as I said, going to be oil, not gas.
Yeah.
I mean,
energy is energy unless you're really hyper on the green world thing. Energy is energy. So if it was oil, then...
There's some things that are obviously run off gas and others that are oil. When it comes to heating homes, you're talking natural gas, and obviously there's a whole. Every country is going to vary a bit in terms of what percentage they're getting from renewables, from nuclear, from coal. The Germans have restarted essentially the dirtiest form of power you could think of, which is brown coal from parts of eastern Germany, as a result of kind of their miscalculations, and I would say really kind of their naivete as far as nuclear power. So
yeah, nuclear power is by far the answer to everybody's problems. I mean, people get this crazy attitude. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. Oh, it's radioactive. Ignoring, for example, the death toll from 3 Mile Island, that would be 0. Nuclear power is by far the most secure means of providing energy going forward, and any economic advantage that fossil fuels may have had at one point, I think that's rapidly becoming less important. I mean, I don't know why Western Europe and the United States both don't start building nuclear power plants left, right, and sideways.
Yeah, I think there's some ideological reasons, and there are some kind of regulatory and structural reasons.
But there's no carbon emissions from nuclear power.
No, but you do have two concerns, obviously, as far as one being the storing the waste, which is not nothing. It's not insurmountable, but that stuff lasts essentially forever. And more importantly, you do have the kind of concerns about if something happens, and we're seeing in Ukraine how dangerous any kind of hostilities around nuclear power plants are and how fraught that is. So I understand some of the European hesitance about this, especially the German hesitance. But when you look at the alternatives, especially in a Europe that is trying to get greener very quickly, you gotta kind of pick the lesser of evils. Yeah.
Now, there are few sources of energy that are here and now available that are greener than nuclear energy.
Well, you've got renewables and solar and things like that, but that is
but I mean those are not in a position to provide more than a fraction of our energy needs. And while they're interesting adjuncts, they're interesting adjuncts, but they aren't the basis for supplying an entire nation's economic energy needs.
No, not at this point in time. I mean, there are some countries. The French have a huge chunk. I mean, I have to look it up, but I think it's 50-60% of their power is nuclear. So
the biggest in the world.
Doing that, and the Japanese, I think so, percentage-wise, and the Japanese as well. But I mean, the U.S. is another example. We've been tremendously deficient on nuclear power, and we've let these plants come offline and be retired and not replaced. So we need to kind of fix ourselves in that regard as well, sooner rather than later.
1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Back with Gil Barndollar of DefensePriorities.org in a moment.
You have a small business. Staples has your sign.
Banners for my bakery?
Staples has your sign.
Oh, posters for my new pet store.
Floor decals for a pharmacy.
Every day, Staples associates help every kind of small business create bold signs to make big impressions. And now get $10 off custom signs, banners, and posters when you spend $50 or more. This is your sign, so print it big at Staples. Ends 10/1. Visit staplesconnect.com/thisisyoursign for details.
There's a new show on CBS you don't want to miss. From the producers of NYPD Blue comes the new series East New York, an exciting and raw ride-along with the officers of Precinct 74 through the streets, alleyways, and bodegas of East New York. Starring Amanda Warren, Richard Kind, and Jimmy Smits' triumphant return to crime TV. The premiere of East New York, right after The Equalizer, Sunday, October 2nd on CBS.
My heart was racing just making spaghetti. I could have waited to tell my doctor, but I didn't wait.
I was short of breath just reading a book. I could have delayed telling my doctor, but I didn't wait.
They told their doctors and found out they have atrial fibrillation, a condition which makes it about 5 times more likely to have a stroke. If you have one or more of these symptoms, irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain, shortness of breath, fatigue, or lightheadedness, this is no time to wait. Contact your doctor.
Brought to you by Bristol-Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
When you love riding a motorcycle, you want to ride it everywhere, even to a physical.
Let's check your weight. Hop on the scale. Look at that. You're down a few pounds. Oh, yeah. Must be the new carbon fiber wheels.
And when you love saving money, you want to save even more. That's why Geico makes it easy to bundle your motorcycle and car insurance.
I'm going to prescribe 91 octane for your engine knock, and we'll want to see you again in 3,000 miles.
Kickstart your savings with Geico Motorcycle. Bundle and save on the things you love.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control of your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank accounts, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problem now by calling the experts at U.S. Tax Shield and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. U.S. Tax Shield offers a price protection guaranteed quote to get you protected today. U.S. Tax Shield is A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau, so call now. 800-785-9132. That's 800-785-9132. U.S. Tax Shield. 800-785-9132.
The sham routine that he put on this morning that's showing the unity and, as people holding hands together. Well, the United States is never going to recognize this. And quite frankly, the world's not going to recognize it either. He can't seize his neighbor's territory and get away with it. It's as simple as that.
President Biden, from his remarks of the past day, as we speak with Senior Fellow Gil Barndollar of DefensePriorities.org. I note here that Mark Hamill, the actor who played Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars films, has joined Ukrainian President